Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This webinar is brought to you by the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders. You can access the recording of this webinar on our website at www.NHADACA.org. After completing this webinar, please upload and complete the quiz if you are interested in receiving a certificate. You can find the quiz in the file pod throughout this presentation on our website at NHADACA.org, or you can email traininginstitute@NHADACA.org. You can email, mail, or fax the completed quiz. Contact information is on the quiz itself. If you are a member of NHADACA, the certificate for this webinar is free. If you aren't a member, the fee is $15. You will receive a certificate worth 1 CE once you have completed and passed the quiz and paid for this webinar, if applicable. Through the New Hampshire Training Institute on Addictive Disorders, this one-hour event is pre-approved by the New Hampshire Board of Licensing for alcohol and other drug use professionals, as well as NBCC. If you have any trouble viewing this webinar, audio problems, or have any technical questions, please contact us at 603-225-7060. Please email any questions regarding the material you see today to traininginstitute@NHADACA.org. You can upload these introduction slides in the file pod to the right of your screen, as well as additional resources that are referenced in today's training. Without further ado, I am going to hand this over to Leanne Dodge, our wonderful presenter, to discuss vaping and marijuana.
Good afternoon. This is Leanne Dodge. I am a prevention specialist, and I come from Maine, or that's where I work right now. And I'm a program director for one of the drug-free communities, and I hail and do my work in South Portland, Maine, which is the 4th largest city. And we are one of 18 drug-free communities in Maine. We are starting our 3rd year in the grant process of 5 years and hopefully another 5 to 10 years total with this funding from the Office of National Drug Control Policy and SAMHSA. And a little bit about my background. So I actually grew up in New Hampshire. I grew up in Walpole, right outside of Keene, New Hampshire, and I went to the University of New Hampshire and worked there for 10 years as a hall director. So I lived and was in charge of 600 undergrads. And then I went and worked at the New Hampshire Teen Institute here in Concord. Moved to Maine and have done a lot of work with all of the campuses, college campuses in Maine, and worked at the University of Southern Maine doing prevention and intervention for substance use, as well as wellness, and worked with 23 community coalitions across the state and worked for the Maine Center for Disease Control. On the side, for the last 18 years, I've been teaching the DEEP course, which is the driver education and evaluation program. That's for folks. I teach the under 21 program for folks who have been arrested for operating under the influence. So those are kind of my credentials for today's work that we're going to be talking about vaping and marijuana. And I will say that I've gone to a few forums on these topics over the last couple of months, and I know that a lot of the work that we're doing, or when people present, we talk about the what and the so what, but we don't always get to the now what. What do we do about this? So at the end of today's presentation, I will share with you a number of ways we're doing prevention and intervention and even treatment to address this issue. And this is really about young people, adolescents, college-age students with this issue. And so what I've found going to some forums, that after it's over, people leave the forum very overwhelmed, like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed. There's nothing I could do about this. This is taking over. They're using words like epidemic across the country. And I really want to make sure people feel like, again, this taking action. What can we do about this? Not just wallow and be overwhelmed with the issue. But we're going to talk about both vaping and marijuana and the crossover today. And what's been happening in Maine, and specifically in South Portland recently, there was a vape shop that opened right across the street from one of our middle schools. Turns out there was no ordinances, and in Maine there's no ordinances for tobacco retailers to have any buffer zones between schools. And so this vape shop with big bright letters, vape shop, and e-cig signage just screaming out right across from the middle school. And so many people just grabbed everyone's attention and got parents especially really angry. So we're working on that in South Portland, and may even be looking at banning flavored tobacco products in South Portland. They're also looking at statewide to ban that. And there are some communities in the country that have done that. So you might have heard Providence, New York City, Chicago have banned flavored tobacco. San Francisco just did that and working on that right now. So I can imagine we might see more and more communities going that way because of the issues that we're seeing with this. So what I wanted to do is show you a little bit and bring you back to your olden days. No matter how old you were, you might remember some of these products that I have here on the screen, and you'll see that we have candy cigarettes. So I'm kind of working from the left over to the right. So we have remember the dots or pills, and they've gotten them really big now, like they're on this big piece of paper if you blow this up. And those were supposed to just be like dots, but they kind of look like it could be acid, if you were really looking into it. We also have the Big League chewing bubble gum, so kind of simulating chewing tobacco, which can be a really big issue, especially for athletes in high schools and in college. Then we have some of these little candy cigarettes. Some are chocolate, some are those kind of chalky tasting ones, some are bubble gum. You might remember you could take the bubblegum ones and blow it out a little, and a little bit of powdery smoke, fake smoke would come out. So these are the old school. There's also toxic waste, smog balls. These are all these kind of weird candies. You can get those up in Kittery at this candy store called Yummies. As you go further to the right, then you see the actual e-cigarette vaping products, Juul. And when we first started hearing about young people using e-cigarettes and Juul, we thought, oh gosh, it's just like the olden days with the fake candy cigarettes and the bubblegum cigars. We didn't really take it too seriously. And then we realized and got the word, this has nicotine in it, powerful doses of nicotine. And that's when the alarm bells went off for prevention folks, people doing intervention, treatment, that this is a big issue now because of the nicotine. And so what I'm going to do is go over this next activity, which we use with students, middle school students, high school students, parents, any community members, to really just look at, in a non-judgmental way, why might someone use vape products. And you can do this with any substance, alcohol. You can use all the substances all at once to just talk about what are the pros and cons of both using and not using. And if you were to draw just a table with 4 boxes and have at the top pros of not using and pros of using at the top, and then the under 2 boxes, the cons of not using and the cons of using. And where we start is up in the right-hand corner with having young people or anybody talk about, well, what are the good things about using Juul or vaping? What do you think are the good things? Why do people do it? And so some of the things kids would say is tastes good. There's lots of different flavors. There's over 1,000 flavors, from anything from bubble gum to mango to even king crab and hot dog flavored. I'm not sure why anyone would want to suck on that, but so tastes good. Some students says, hey, it gives me a head buzz. It keeps me awake. It's fun. You can do cool tricks with the vapor that lasts in the air longer than smoke does, and fitting in. It's social. It's easy to connect with people. So those are some of the pros why some students say, hey, this is why I would use it, or what I'm seeing with it. Now, if you went down below that, well, what are the downsides of using? And people would say, hey, it's not good for you. It's bad for your lungs. I heard that it can be addictive. Some people say, hey, I have a lot of insomnia now using it because it's a stimulant. I could get in trouble for using it. It costs a lot of money. It really is adding up. And when I'm not using it or withdrawing from it, I can get really angry, and it's hard to focus in class if I'm not using it. So once I've started, so those are some of the cons of using. If you moved over to the cons of not using, so what would be the downsides of not using? And these would be not fitting in, or now having to deal with stress. So before it might have been a stress reliever, now I have to deal with those feelings. I might have less friends if I'm hanging out with people that are using. So those might be some cons. And then finally, the pros of not using. What's the good stuff? Well, better health, save money, not get into trouble, be able to focus. So I think this is a helpful first start to look at and to really analyze that. Man, the pros of using the good stuff, tastes good, fun, fitting in, that's like the most appealing box in the short term. And the uncomfortable box is the cons of not using. So not fitting in, dealing with stress, maybe less friends. And those two boxes are kind of temporary. Then you think about the cons of using. So these can be addiction and costly and in trouble. And those are things we really most want to avoid. And then finally, the box we most want to have are the pros of not using: better health, saving money, not getting into trouble. But those pros are kind of far away. They're long term. They might be down the road. And most of our young people live in the moment. And the brain is ready to take risks at age 13, so we can see why we're seeing younger and younger kids starting to use that brain reward system. So I really recommend that. That's a great activity just to get people to think about, and it comes from them. What are the downsides? What might be the good things about using? And if I use long enough, where could it lead to? And those are the cons. And to really say, does it always? Because some students will say, wait, if I even try it one time, am I definitely going to be addicted to it? So we want to make sure that we're not doing scare tactics, but saying, hey, it's more likely that the downsides are going to happen if you start using. So let's move on. So that's an activity. Here's some terms that we're hearing to describe this new phenomenon that's kind of taking over. So vaping, e-cigs, vape pen, hookahs, e-juice, all of those different words you see on the screen. And I want to really turn people to the side just to tell you that this PowerPoint is over on your side, and a lot of resources that I'll go over at the end as well. So those are some terms you might hear. These are some types of e-cigarettes that you could find in pipes and cigars. They can be in bigger mods, which are quite, they're kind of large items here. You can see this is kind of on its side. However, some people have had trouble holding that up, or it's given them some kind of pain for their wrist. So now there's actually some nice wrist guards that you can have so that you won't have problems with holding on to that device. And then again, you'll see these other options for people. And what we're really concerned with are these little tiny rechargeable e-cigarettes. And let's look a little bit more on that. And here is the Juul. This is the most used by young people. And one of the tricky things about it is how small it is, and very discreet. So where could you hide it? Well, you could hide it in your sleeve. They're magnetic, so they can stick under your desk. So if a teacher's walking by, you can just kind of stick it right under your desk, and there it is, stuck. A lot of students are using them in bathrooms, and what we're seeing is that students leave them for the next person, either on the toilet paper holder, that metal box, or even attached to the toilet itself, which is nice and sanitary. And a lot of times people are leaving it for the next person to use, so that again just passing that on. So they're very small. They can also get these Juuls and the kind of the devices in things like sweatshirts, and you can buy it. It's about $40 online. It comes from Colorado. There's a company, and the strings from the sweatshirt, how it attaches through the hood, is the whole device is in the hood, and you can smoke it through those strings of the sweatshirt. And again, as I was saying, there's tons of different flavors, and there are some restrictions. I think in New Hampshire they were saying they're restricting the flavors. You have to just get them online, and there's just a few different flavors that are available, like menthol, mint, and tobacco flavored. But in other places in Maine, I know we do have a lot of the flavors available for people, and they're right at the convenience store, right on the counter for people, and really have specials and price reductions for selling the starter kit and all of that. So this is the concerning thing is about the Juul, is how tiny it is and how discreet it is. Well, what else? We have a video that you can access through my PowerPoint here on the right. We're not able to show it to you right now, but it's a really great short clip on YouTube really talking about how this came about and how it's marketed to young people, and really the concerning amount of nicotine that's in the Juul. So let's talk about these things listed are what's in the Juul pod, and you'll see there's question marks. There's still some things they don't know about. This is not FDA approved, so we don't know what's all in it. We actually don't know all the long-term effects yet of these different things that are in here. And again, if you see how many of these are produced, 20 million devices, and 70% of the total e-cigarette market is the Juul. And again, just think about that. They kind of call it the iPod of e-cigarettes, and it looks very similar in colors to an iPhone. And let's keep on going here. There's a couple videos that, again, you can access through the website, and I highly recommend it. These are middle school age kids on the left talking about the different flavors, handing it over to each other when they're walking through class, and kind of carrying on and talking about their favorite flavors. And then the other one on the right are some girls after school, probably young teenagers, and you'll see them just talking and charging their Juul on their own laptop. And so again, you might hear in schools sometimes students are charging them in class on their own laptops, or have even used teachers' laptops to charge their devices, so that's great. So this just kind of normalizing, chatting about it, and just passing it over to their friends. So if you get a minute, check out these, and there's many other YouTube videos as well. So what else is a bummer about this? Well, it's how sneaky the marketing has been for these devices. And I want to do a little quiz with you. Can you pick out which are the tobacco products and which are just kid things? So we have a little test, and again, it seems like it's not opening, but when you do clip on these, when you see our webinar PowerPoint, you'll notice that almost all of these are actually, oh, here it is, it's working. So this first one is an ice cream eraser. It's exactly what it says to do, that it is this kind of ice cream eraser. Oh, so that is one. But this next one is not a highlighter. It's a flavored tobacco device that gets past parents and teachers because it looks like one. The next one is it's actually just sprinkles, regular sprinkles, but this is a flavor that you can get with from the tobacco industry. This one here looks like it's not hot sauce, but it can burn, and it has e-juice in this, can cause seizures and burns. We are hearing that students with these devices, some of them have blown up in people's pockets and heated up, and some kids have gotten some scarring and some fire setting from that use of it being combustible in their pockets. This next one is a flash drive. But they look just like this. And over here, these are Juul pods, and they aren't game pieces. And again, these ones come in a pack. This vanilla, 6 milligrams, that's really high potency nicotine, and it's got e-juice, and it's got nickel and lead in it. And this next one is not a slushy. And again, all of these other pieces that are added to it can lead to lung disease. These ones too, look at the differences. How would you tell these apart if you just glanced at it? So the things on the top are e-liquids. Down below are their similar cousins that are not e-liquids. So again, really that marketing is pretty spectacular that they've been able to really co-opt on yummy, kid-friendly snacks. You don't see probably a lot of adults eating Sour Patch Kids or Candy King. So just again, that appealing to young people. So here's things that kids are saying about this issue. Let's see if this will, we'll pop these up. And again, this first one, how long do people's Juul pods normally last? Mine are empty after a few hours, not even. Now, in a pod, one Juul pod is equivalent to actually more than 1 pack of cigarettes of nicotine. So that's, if you can imagine we're seeing some of this use happening in the 6th grade. If a child was using, or even a teen, using just 1 Juul pod, so that'd be like smoking the equivalent of a pack of cigarettes. So 20 cigarettes. Can you imagine a kid walking down the hall smoking a pack of cigarettes between 8 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon? Some kids are already past 1 pod a day because of being addicted to it. So that's a ton of nicotine on the brain. Again, you can see these other pictures here, and really, again, just kind of having fun and normalizing this with cartoons and tips. Oh, there's so much on YouTube. You can look at all the different tricks and things that young people are doing. A lot of people will use, again, in bathroom stalls, you might see 5 students in one of the larger bathroom stalls. People call it the Juul stall, and really, really troubling for schools to figure out, well, we can't really put cameras in the bathrooms, but how do we monitor kids going in and out? Do you not let kids go to the restroom? Do you have them empty their pockets before they go? And because the brain, once it gets addicted to nicotine, which doesn't take long to do, can be a few times of using for some people, that the brain typically craves cigarettes every 20 minutes, nicotine. So in high school, we have 80-minute blocks. So that means about 3 times in one block, and we have 4 blocks a day, a student is craving having a hit of this Juul and having that nicotine. And what if they can't go? Well, what is that like? Do we know of folks who have been addicted to combustible cigarettes? What is it like when people are withdrawing from that or not able to use? Cranky, can't focus, extra cranky, so really angry. We are seeing kids have Juul fights in the hallway, taking them from each other. They get very angry at administration when they confiscate those and want them back. When do I get this back? So really agitated. So really the learning that someone should be doing in class, if they're not focusing and they're not even present because they're going to the bathroom a couple times each class, we're seeing real disruption in learning and in emotional regulation. So just to think about that issue with the nicotine in the young brain. And here's what our own students in Maine reported and talked about. Let's see if we can get those up. There's some comments that we have young people talking about. And hopefully here they are. I think people are vaping because it looks so fun, but at the same time, it's bad for your health. We did some presentations with our middle schoolers, and they wrote anonymous questions. And one kid just wrote that. They said, I kind of want to try it, but I kind of don't. So again, that feeling of ambivalence, not really sure, but weighing those pros and cons. I think people are vaping because of depression and loneliness. And again, fitting in, peer pressure, those kinds of things. And people are getting so used to it, students are, after school, in school, so I don't really have a problem with it. Most people don't realize it has nicotine in it or any of these other toxic pieces like lead and nickel and glycerin and those things. And then again, some of our students will say, I don't go to the bathroom all day because as soon as I walk in, there's kids there vaping. Or we asked some freshmen and they, asked, well, how often do you get offered to do it, to use it? And they've said every day. So it's really a concerning issue going on. And finally, hey, it's like a new iPhone. I'm going to try it. So it's new. Again, my brain's ready to take risks at 13. Now, the other thing about the young brain is that it's best for learning from ages 13 to 20 without much effort. So that's a great thing. Kids can speak more than one language, maybe even 3 languages, 4 languages. They play more than one instrument. They play more than one sport. They're great at computers. So again, it doesn't take much effort for them to learn new things. The unfortunate part, the other double side of that is 90% of addiction happens in the young brain. So we got priming that brain, getting started. And when you think about nicotine in the brain, as a primer, think of paint. So if you've ever painted a fence or your cupboards, you use primer first and you put that down so that the next coat that you put on really sticks. So think of nicotine as that way, that it primes the brain. It might not lead young people to try other substances, but if they were to, they can become more addicted to those substances and more quickly. And so if someone starts drinking alcohol, they can become more addicted to it more quickly. It also kind of has a synergistic effect, so it makes actually the alcohol feel even better. And as nicotine is a stimulant, some people will use that to keep going, and so they may even use more. We've met with our folks throughout the continuum from prevention to recovery, and a gentleman who is a doctor in Maine who runs our recovery residence said, the Juul is not a far leap to crack cocaine, which we're seeing. I don't know if you're seeing that in New Hampshire. We're seeing a big increase in cocaine use and overdose deaths. And so when you think of powerful stimulant like nicotine in the Juul or other e-cig devices, that over time, and if someone's starting when they're 14, that you could see how that could lead to, I need something more powerful. And when you think about something getting into your brain, the most powerful way to get it and quickly is to inhale something, then inject, then drink it, then eat it. So we can see that that's going to be really concerning, that if people are priming their brain with nicotine at such a young age, are we going to see in a few years more addiction to other substances and have a really even more difficult time undoing that because of that priming? So that's our concern, is really the nicotine piece. The next part is a quick discussion question we'll have you think about for a minute. True or false? We're going to start talking a little bit about marijuana soon. Marijuana can increase the risk of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, and psychosis, including schizophrenia, where there's family history. So take a little moment, if you will, and discuss that or think about it if you're by yourself. Okay, and we're going to move on. The answer is true, and we're seeing more of that happening with our young people, that they are, especially with marijuana, they're having increased anxiety. We'll look at some slides about that. And so sometimes they'll be using this to treat anxiety, which is actually leading them to more anxiety and some more depression. Let's look at why that is, and just this interruption of this. These are also in the PowerPoint slides that you can look at, and they actually are really happening in those screens. We're not able to show you this, but one of the other appeals to the vaping piece is the smoke tricks that people are doing. And again, go on YouTube and you'll be just mesmerized by how cool this actually looks. This gal down at the bottom is doing what they call the dragon. So she's got it coming out of her nose and sides of her mouth. And these guys, you can, again, look at that through the PowerPoint. They are just doing these amazing tricks. And there's actually competitions, and some of the companies are giving thousands of dollars in prize money to folks who do these tricks. And they've been paying a young man who's 17 to do a daily trick with vaping, and they, it came to their attention, hey, this young man is really young, did you know this? And I guess his mom was okay because he was making a lot of money getting paid to do these tricks and post these videos. We're going to switch gears now, and our last half hour of our time together is talking about marijuana. And why are these connected? Well, you can actually put marijuana, THC, and the oil in vaping devices. So we're seeing that happening. We'll talk a little bit about what are the latest trends, what we're seeing with young people, how they're using marijuana, and the risks around this. So here we have today's marijuana. There are much higher levels of THC than there were back in the 60s and 70s. And depending on how someone is ingesting it, taking it in, it can be actually up into 90% THC if someone is using dabs, which is really the extraction of the THC, and using that in the vape devices. We were seeing it before with butane torches, and people really getting injured from that, and fires and explosions with that. Now people are, learning that to put in the vape pen or the e-cig device is much less risky as far as having that happen, burns, but it can be really powerful. So that much, again, one dab, that extraction is equivalent to 5 joints of marijuana. So it's really significant. And why that is a problem is that if someone's using really potent THC right off the bat, they are increasing their tolerance much more quickly. And so they're going to need more and more every time that they're using, and they're getting closer to addiction much more quickly. So again, high levels of THC these days, harmful pesticides that could be in that, and hey, it's not harmful. There's a lot of people thinking that, like, hey, it's medicine. It can cure so many things, and I love hearing that word, that it cures things. It doesn't cure cancer. There are some therapeutic benefits to some parts of the cannabinoids that are in THC, but again, just kind of that's really leading to more use with young people thinking it's not that harmful, and even parents saying, well, at least he's not doing heroin, that it's just marijuana, and when I was a kid I used it and I was fine. So really realizing how much more powerful it is and how accessible. In Maine, we've legalized it for folks 21 and over. We're still working out all the rules about the retail access, but that is coming really soon. So there's increased access to marijuana, whether kids getting it home, growing their own, really easy to access. And you can see, again, similar to with the vape flavors, we can look at THC in edibles and in gummies and candies and all kinds of teas and different ways to eat it and use it. Is really, it's just overwhelming to think of how many places and ways people can get it. Now, the other thing about potency, back in the day, if someone were to smoke a joint, about 25% of the THC would get burned off. So it's very hot when you light a match and burn that down, and you're actually not smoking the whole joint because there's a little bit at the end. However, if you're vaping it, you can get all of the THC and none of it gets burned off because vaping does not get it as hot, so it doesn't burn off the THC. So that's, again, one of those things, like, I'm not sure I want to tell young people that, but they're getting higher doses in the ways that they're using it. Let's talk quickly about edibles. So we are seeing that that's another way to get it into the system. And if you look at these brownies and you ask someone, I sometimes do this demo with high school students, is ask them to just eat a sixth of this brownie. And to that would be one dose. And the way, again, when we're talking about how you get something into your system and up into your brain to get the effect, eating is the slowest way. So with edibles, someone might not feel that one dose for a half hour to up to 2 hours. They won't feel anything. Now, if I don't feel anything, what am I going to do? And kids will say, take another bite. And you say, hey, would you ever eat a whole brownie? And so if I ate that whole brownie, that's 6 doses. Marijuana in lower doses is more of a sedative. In higher doses, it can be a hallucinogen. So thinking about, well, why might that be risky if someone is going to hallucinate in 2 hours from now? And then asking, is that really 6 doses in that brownie? Do we know the strength? Do we know the purity of the THC? Maybe it's 4 doses, maybe it's 9. Again, are all brownies cut the same size? So again, that in, just that unpredictable strength and purity is what can be really concerning with edibles. And again, does that look like a THC brownie? Does it look like a regular brownie? Also, pets are getting a hold of edibles at homes and can be really toxic and poisonous for toddlers as well. Let's talk about why marijuana can have kind of a risky and short and long-term impacts on the young brain. So the first couple things that's critical for learning is that marijuana, and sometimes with alcohol as well, but we're really seeing with marijuana, is affecting people's short-term memory. So if you're in class, and I ask students this, can you have long-term memory without having short-term memory first? And they kind of go, yeah, and you're like, no, you have to have short-term memory first, decide whether or not to store it into your long-term memory. And so if I'm in class and I'm not really taking in information, does the teacher go over everything the next time I'm in class? In case anybody was impaired, right? So now I'm not gathering and learning as well. I can't remember, I'm not storing it. The other thing is working memory has an impact. So that means anything I already know, I'm not really able to connect new information to what I've already learned. So similar to short-term memory, but my working memory, it's not connecting to things that I've already figured out. The other thing that can happen is something called state-dependent restriction, which again can happen with any substance. If I learn something when I'm sober, it's best recalled when I'm sober. But if I learn something when I'm impaired, I actually can best recall that when I'm impaired again. So usually these are social skills with alcohol. So if I was at a party, what might I learn? And it's not when I'm hammered. It usually happens at about a 0.08 blood alcohol level to about a 0.11, and it makes a window. And anything, when I get to that BAC or BAL level, anything I learn in there, it's actually best recalled. So talking to people, dancing, playing beer pong. Sometimes people say they drive better when they're impaired because they learned to drive when they were impaired. Famous musicians, Eric Clapton, Aerosmith, when they got into recovery and they went back to play, they couldn't remember any of their songs or how to play their instruments. Now, the good thing is people can relearn those skills without using, but it takes rewiring, kind of redoing that in the brain. But that can be concerning with marijuana. A lot of times people will use it to fall asleep, to focus, to deal with anxiety and stress, and we'll look at some more about why that over time can be really tricky if I'm relying on it for those different skills in my brain. Some people will feel or experience lower verbal IQ with marijuana and alcohol, where doesn't mean they're not smart, but they can't access words as well. So they might try to describe, if you had something in front of you like your phone, you'd be able to describe it to someone, hey, it's red, it's an Android, it's old, my dog bit the bottom of it. But if I don't have, if I have lower verbal IQ, I might be able to say, hey, it's kind of reddish and the size of a graham cracker, and now write a 5-page paper. So you can really see how this affects IQ. And we're seeing more impaired driving in Maine with marijuana, with THC. And the tricky part that's happening is we don't have good ways to detect active THC. So carboxy THC is the inactive THC, which can be found in hair and urine weeks after someone's used. And the part that's the active impairing THC is the hydroxy THC, and that really can only be tested by blood. And so when people are getting pulled over, unless they have a drug recognition expert or someone that can do the blood test, which can be pricey and costly, people are, again, you can figure out if someone's impaired, but to really find out about current or recent use in the last few hours, you'd have to do blood tests. So we've really got to figure this out because we're seeing more impaired driving. And again, in my 18 years of teaching the OUI class in Maine, the last about 4 or 5 years, really from having almost no one there for anything but alcohol, now I'm seeing a couple people out of 10 young people there for OUIs from marijuana use. We also can see increased heart rate. So people who have heart troubles already, there have been fatalities and heart attacks, and it's rare but really serious. Lung damage. The other thing we're seeing is cannabinoid hyperemesis syndrome. So that is this never-ending vomiting and violent vomiting that can happen for hours at a time. And the only thing that can kind of soothe that is people talking about just taking hot showers, and they're in the shower for hours at a time, and they're in such pain, horrific pain. And typically it is with long-term users, but when talking to social workers at our high school, they're seeing students who are really wasting away marijuana users. They're very thin, and there are a lot of stomach troubles, and parents will say that, like, my son has had like these flu-like symptoms for like 2 months. He can't shake it. So we're actually seeing, kind of pieces of this actually with younger people that may have not been using so long because, again, of the strength and potency of the THC. So we're going to see more of that, I believe, and with younger kids. And hey, also the trick and the not good thing is, again, people thinking it's not addictive, but we know that 1 out of 6 young people who start in adolescent years can become addicted to it. And that can be really concerning for people thinking that it's harmless, it's not that bad, it's natural, but it can be, again, there's addiction that is really likely. And in fact, in Maine, the primary substance that young people are in treatment for is marijuana. A little bit more about almost like that same state-dependent restriction. Initially, again, marijuana does relax and calm the brain, that sedative effect. It's actually 4 times stronger in the brain than your own ability to relax. So so when we say, if a young person goes, hey, it helps me relax, saying, no, it can't, it doesn't, it actually does. But over time, it cannot do it without the marijuana. And that, when you think about the stress and anxiety that seems to be on the rise with our young people, if they are not able to have coping skills or learn how to relieve stress without using, that's really concerning for what we're seeing with young kids not even making it to school. The other thing is, again, people will talk about how it helps me focus. It's really the inability to shift attention. So if you go back to the driving risks, people might be focusing just on the road ahead and not, again, inability to shift attention. And most of driving, you are shifting your attention all the time, peripheral vision. So we're seeing more crashes. Oftentimes people are going much more slowly on when they're impaired with marijuana versus with alcohol. They might be speeding on the highway with alcohol and maybe going 30. Some students will say, oh, I often have my feet on the wrong pedals. So again, that confusion in the brain. The other part with marijuana is that it increases your alpha and theta waves in your brain, which are those awesome waves that happen right before someone falls asleep. And we can probably all agree there's like no better feeling than that relaxation. However, that feeling can last for many hours and even in waking hours. So if you are that relaxed all day long for 12 or more hours, you can think about when people talk about the amotivational syndrome, that they are really, how do you get stuff done when you're that relaxed? They found with Buddhist monks that they're almost in constant theta wave production. So that calming, relaxed feeling, that's a really good one to have when it's in the right appropriate time. So we really need to help teach young people mindfulness and relaxation and be able to do that without using marijuana. Again, back to the mental health pieces, we're seeing that young people are 2 times more likely to experience depression or anxiety. And again, increased risk for schizophrenia and psychosis, especially if there's family history. And with that, not everyone is going to develop schizophrenia or psychosis, even if it's in their family, but THC, marijuana can pull that out and bring it forward where it might not have been awakened, and 3 times more likely to have suicidal thoughts from using marijuana. Just want to briefly talk about CBD because that is not psychoactive, but we can see that there's a lot of confusion out there. They're finding that it can help with inflammation and chronic pain, but not enough long-term research. But that throws in a whole other level. Even on my way here today, I stopped at the gas station, and there were CBD gummies right on the front shelf, by the lighters, by the Juul, right on the front counter. And so that can be confusing, again, to have that thrown into the mix. Like, hey, there's these wellness connection stores with all the different products. And even at TJ Maxx, there's hemp shampoo. And so it's just a very confusing time for people of like, what is harmful? What might be helpful? Again, potency is the trick. So I want to spend our last 10 or so minutes talking about, well, what do we do about all this? And I'm going to share the strategies we're using in Maine and especially in South Portland. One of the things is to change and look at environmental strategies, which means changing the things around our young people. And I think when you may have seen the poster long ago, there's one that said, blaming youth for underage drinking is like blaming fish for dying in a polluted stream. Same kind of thing, I think, when we're talking about the juuling and vaping and marijuana, that we need to change, the water that people are swimming in and the environment, the community that we're living in. So one of the things we've done, we're the only school in Maine that's changed our substance use policy, that now our students do not get suspended unless they're dealing substances. They are getting suspended for that. But we use a restorative approach, and so a student who is caught using, they would have it still confiscated, but and their parents would be called. They need to go home that first day, but then the next day they come back to school and they have a formal assessment by one of our licensed alcohol and drug counselors, and that kind of determines if they need continued connection with that person or the social worker. They might do an intervention program that we have created. One of them is on vaping, and you'll see I've included this and would love for people to download these programs that we created. And that vaping intervention is 45 minutes long. And it's people have used it in Maine and said it's been really helpful for clinicians, social workers, guidance counselors. Pretty easy to walk through. It's self-explanatory, and it's really helped them connect with students in a more meaningful way. And we really did not have anything in place, and this stuff just took us by storm. So we use, again, a clinical assessment, then an intervention, and there's quit resources. Again, that's listed over here. It's called Sidekicks, and there's a list of apps that people can use. The American Medical Association has now approved using nicotine replacement, things like lozenges and patch and gum for young people. Before they said, no, we're not going to allow it for people under 18, but they are now saying that's okay to use for quitting. The other thing we have is something called the Student Intervention and Reintegration Program. We've been teaching this program, which is the same curriculum that we use for OUI offenders. It's called Prime for Life, and I think some folks in New Hampshire might be using this also. So that's a 12-hour intervention that students may need to go through. And they also, with this new policy, they may have to do community service. They may have to apologize to their teacher or anyone else. They, again, if you know the restorative practice approach, there's different questions that someone would have to, who did I harm? How am I going to move forward? So we've really changed our approach. And then we also changed our athletic code so that kids are not kicked off the team. They may not be able to play games for, a week or a period of time, but they're still able to practice and participate in meetings. They're just not able to play in some games. Now, what we're learning and what we know is suspending kids, kicking people off the teams does not change behavior. There's like shaming. There's no real help. It's not treating this as a clinical issue. It's just saying you knew the rules. This is a privilege. You're kicked off the team. We're not going to have you represent the school if you're making these choices. And what would happen is that kids would not return to the teams. They would not play. Or if they went home because they were suspended, they probably weren't doing homework. And this was leading, some schools had 2 weeks suspension, 3 weeks suspension for first offenses that you're kicked out of school. How would you ever make that up academically, even if you were doing well? That's a huge amount of time to be lost. We also know that being involved in co-curricular activities is a protective factor. And sometimes it might be the only thing that's keeping a young person motivated to stay in school. So if we say, hey, you're not allowed to do this anymore, you're dead to us, that actually, again, was not addressing the issue or getting the person help. We also have a voluntary referral. So a student or their friend could say, I want to bring this forward to the social worker and get them some help before it gets to the point where they would get, have to take this break from being part of the, games and such for co-curricular activities. The other big thing is we do a program called Sidekicks, which is a bystander training, and they have a middle school version and high school version for young people to learn really motivational interviewing. How would you address your friend? And it could be on any topic, not just substance use, but eating disorders or mental health issues. So really, those are the people right on the front lines are their peers. Also going into the middle schools and high schools and teaching refusal skills that throughout life there will always be opportunities to use substances. It's everywhere. You go to a restaurant, what's the first thing they ask you? Would you like a drink? And again, as marijuana becomes more and more accessible, really learning what are ways that you could quickly just say nope, I'm all set, I'm good, using that broken record approach, conversation switch, and really getting out of some situations where that can be really difficult. And the more practice someone can do and listening to their gut, that can be really helpful, really lifetime-wise. And I wanted to show you some pictures of the students we have involved. We started with just 3 students. They're kind of right in this front row. 2 years ago, as part of SOPO Unite, that's our coalition. It has now grown to 60 students in the high school and 50 in the middle schools. And so it's not like the NARC club, but I'm happy to, if people want to get in touch with me, learn about the different activities and strategies we've used with our high school students and middle schoolers. And really engaging them. We meet every 2 weeks in the morning before school starts and after school. We've got a lot of students that are diverse now, that are a part of it, that aren't just athletes. So the other key thing about this is I think we do make the mistake of putting all of this work on young people. And we say, oh, we've got to get the youth. If you could get a couple kids to come to the city council meeting, and if you could have them do a press conference. And it's really not about the youth doing all of this. It's about the adults that are in young people's lives. So coaches, parents, retailers, the school staff, law enforcement, all the people that are involved with youth and have an impact are the folks that really need the education and training on how to intervene, how to do these changing of policies in the environment. That is critical, and not just to say, well, the youth they're really the only ones that can have an impact on other kids. We all have a part to play in prevention and intervention. So last key things, these are some key, things really for parents or anyone working with young folks on how do you address this issue with them. First of all, we know scare tactics do not work. And it's just horrifying to hear when people say, oh, there was an elderly man come in to the sixth graders and talk about if they were to ever drink, they would die immediately. You know, like that's kind of the message. And even talk to our high school kids saying, I don't remember anything in health class. And really thinking about having health classes. Ours are in 10th grade. Well, that ship has sailed. We need to have health throughout middle school and throughout high school, not just one little half credit sophomore year. That just really think about being more comprehensive. But here's some things to just think about, that really people knowing the facts, getting really honest, the real deal information, don't make stuff up. Students have access to information as well. And over on the side, again, there's a really great, it's about 8 pages, but it's called What You Need to Know and How to Talk to Teens. And it's for the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids. So I highly recommend seeing that. It's really a great, really comprehensive piece about vaping. And being open and ready to listen to young people. Again, that pros and cons. If we only say like, hey, if you ever do this, it'll kill you, or you're going to get lung cancer, or you're in trouble. But really to think about, why would someone do this? What are they getting out of it? How can we replace those pros? So if someone's saying, it feels good, I'm fitting in, it's a stress reliever, tastes good, are there other things that someone could do to get that feeling without using these devices and marijuana? Being patient with young people, and folks will say, you have to listen to all the stuff they're talking about, the boring video game, things you're not interested in as a parent maybe to hear about, because then when you do want to have a conversation about these heavier topics, you've already had that relationship of listening and communicating about really all topics. And again, avoiding criticism and being positive, like, well, what might be some ways we could think about getting those needs met without using. And again, not doing the at 7 o'clock we're going to have the big talk, but where a lot of people will talk about driving in a car with a teen is a great place, because you're both kind of looking forward and not, sitting knee to knee at the couch, but really thinking of natural times. Or if you see things on TV that brings it up, that can be another opportunity. But really having expectations from our youth, and whether I'm a parent or I'm in school. So one of our administrators said, we need to take our school back, to have so many people talking about how accessible and how many young people are using in school, that's just not okay that this is happening. And again, those refusal skills, and for ourselves to be role models for young people as well. One more question here, and I was talking about this earlier, is just one of those discussion questions about that hyperemesis syndrome. And although the answer is true, we are seeing it with people who may not be long-term users. We might be seeing, some slighter pieces of that really severe nausea and throwing up, even with younger and less experienced users. So with that, I welcome if anyone wants to get in touch with me. I think my information, or if you would like to email me, it's ldodge@southportland.org. I welcome people to use these resources on the side. And again, check out the YouTube videos if you haven't already, just to see how appealing and what we're really up against, but that there are ways to address it. And the again, the vaping curriculum was taken from the tobacco folks. Big from our state did a thing for how to quit tobacco, and so we just modified that to really have it be more youth friendly. And we added some pieces from the work I did at the college level from a program called Basics, which is brief alcohol screening and intervention for college students. So some of the activities in this vaping curriculum are taken from that program as well. And again, I welcome anybody to get in touch with me, and I'll be doing a couple more trainings from this, this New Hampshire Training Institute coming up on environmental strategies on April 15th, and then also in the fall I'll do a longer version on this topic. So again, thank you so much, and I hope everyone is doing well. Take care.